Well, thank you, Paige, and hello, everyone. It's a real treat to have assembled two tremendous guests for today's webinar. I want to thank my staff for drawing together Barry and Bill to join me today as we focus on the big picture of building financially sustainable communities. Well, that can't be done without volunteer board members who successfully work with each other and meet the needs of the association. So today we celebrate and honor those volunteers. I welcome all the board members in our audience. I thank you to the managers and the professionals who have joined us. And hopefully this will be great information for the board members and the managers who lead them and work alongside them. As Paige mentioned today, we've got a group of us, and so we're going to be sharing the microphone between the three of us, Barry, myself, and Bill. I want to say a few more words about Barry. He came to our attention through his involvement with CAI National, and he's agreed to make his book available at a special webinar price, and that's a whole lot better than on Amazon, $10 including shipping through the end of the month for our webinar attendees. And we learned of Bill from corresponding with him through the years as he was preparing reserve study updates for his association. He nicely documented his experience and the lessons he learned for his local CAI chapter, and we wanted to give his good work greater exposure. So for those of you outside the territory of CAI Connecticut, you can find his article series in the library portion of our Learning Center on our website. You can find it by poking around or just click the link in the webinar outline that you receive after the webinar for those who fill out the survey that Paige was mentioning. Well, I hope you are taking notes, got a piece of paper and a pen, but I want to remind you that today's session is being recorded and we're going to upload that recording to our website for future reference and create an outline for all attendees. We're going to send that out to those of you who fill out a survey at the end of today's session. And in that, we'll have answers to the questions we were able to answer online and all those that we just plain didn't have time to answer live during our session today. And because this is a live session, as Paige indicated, you're all muted, but in case we need some feedback on a particular question or issue, we're going to ask for a show of hands. And you might wonder, how do I do that? Here in my office or living room or wherever you might be? Well, on your control panel, it's likely over to the right of your screen. You'll see a little hands raised icon. And so when I ask for a show of hands, you just click on that little hands raised. And we'll electronically be able to see a field of hands raising across the, I guess, our room here. And if you came with a question, or if at any time you have a question for one of our guest speakers, just type it into the dialog box in your control panel. Again, very similar to what you see on screen. Paige is going to be monitoring those questions throughout our session today. She'll be a very busy bee, and she'll select from those at the end during our Q&A time. So do feel free to ask a question. You can ask a general question or aim it specifically at Barry or Bill. They're the featured guests today. So without further delay, let's give that technology a test. Grab your mouse and give me a hands raise if you're ready to start today's program. Click your hands raised icon, and very nice. Okay, everyone's ready. I'm going to click hands down, and we'll get started with today's program. I'm going to start with just getting a little bit familiar with Barry here. What got you interested in volunteers, and what prompted you to research and write a book on this topic?
Yeah, and Robert, thank you so much for asking, and what an honor it is to spend some time with all of our learners today. So I was in the corporate space in talent development, learning and development, and leadership development type roles, and all along, I'm a guy who likes to say yes. I just like to get actively involved in a variety of different ways in my community.
Sounds like you're a volunteer.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down to, and certainly involvement in my own homeowners association. In fact, I'm the current president. I've been sitting on the board for nearly 13 years now in my community in lovely Winter Garden, Florida. And I found over my volunteer experiences that I was having what I call a dichotomy of experiences. Sometimes those volunteer things that I did were really meaningful and fulfilling and just inspired me to want to keep doing them. And then there were other times when I realized that it didn't take long for me to be awash with this feeling that, this isn't what I signed up for. This is not what I thought it was going to be. And that's when I put my organizational development hat on and I began to study what makes the difference between those two things, and it kept coming back to the same answer. The same result of my research was it's all about leadership. There is somebody that is in any organization, in every volunteer-supported organization, including HOAs and COAs, that has the ability to make or break a volunteer's experience by something that they say, something that they do, or in some cases it's something that they don't say or they don't do that really drives and creates engagement for that volunteer. And so that's really what inspired me to put 200 pages together that provides some leadership to people who lead volunteers.
Yeah, you sound like a problem solver. You saw the difference and started wrestling with it and figuring it out and getting it documented, and we are so thankful that you were able to get it put together and on paper, and now a tremendous resource. What launched your involvement in specifically the community association industry?
Yeah, it's interesting because it really speaks to the power of relationship building. There is a person on staff with the National CAI that he actually used to be on staff with my own professional association when I was more in the learning and development community. I've since moved more into the nonprofit world with my work focus, but I ran into him at a conference and we jumped into some really cool conversation, and I shared what my current project was, which was I had been writing a book. This started about 2.5 years ago, and it really went from there because he immediately saw that my work, my focus is a fit, because obviously many of our communities are driven and would not be where they are without volunteers. So that's really where my work with CAI and with anything community-based launched.
Well, I'm very glad that fortunate connection was there, because there's over 300,000 associations in the country, and they all are run by a board of directors, a volunteer board of directors, and this is just a tremendous resource because it is those board members, those volunteers, who are the backbone of running this entire industry. And I'm glad that you've matched up with CAI. You'll be speaking at the upcoming May conference, won't you?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so for any of you out there planning to go to the CAI National Conference in Las Vegas in May, Barry's going to be one of the breakout session speakers, and highly recommended you learn from this master of volunteering. Well, I'm going to switch over a little bit and say hello to Bill. Bill, welcome, and what is your background and what motivated you to become a volunteer running for the board of your association?
Hello there. Thank you. I retired from a professionally challenging job managing a group that prepared bids and proposals for research and development projects, mostly for the Department of Defense. This involved lots of laws, project management, financial cost estimating. All this is audited by the Defense Contract Audit Agency. I wanted to use some of the professional skills that I developed after I retired. I also like to keep busy. Since we were a new association in 2003, I like the challenges to set up the entire accounting system for a corporation.
Okay, and let's see, 2003, still there? It's 2017?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm now in my 12th year on the board. I've been treasurer for all that time, and I've been actually the bookkeeper for about 10 of those years.
So not only do I have two industry experts, I've got two board member veterans here. Well, what drove your interest in the reserve aspect of things? Writing a 5-part series for your local CAI chapter was no small effort.
No, actually two things drove it. Number one is when we started the board in 2003, when we took over the association from the builder, we recognized that the best time to start a reserve program was when the association was just starting out. It's been an uphill battle. Not all the owners buy into it, and we still face many questions. I thought our responses to the questions posed were worth sharing with others facing the same situations. The second factor was your program, quickreserves.com. In the beginning, I built my own spreadsheet for reserve plans until I found quickreserve.com. Since one of the stumbling blocks to a reserve plan was the cost and the difficulty calculating the plan, using quickreserves.com to prepare a good draft plan and to get the ball rolling was another thing worth sharing with others. I don't know how widespread the knowledge was about it.
Yeah. Well, what I hear consistent between you guys is a heart of service. Barry said he's one that tends to say yes, and you said you wanted to serve your association, and once you figure something out, you wanted to even share it with others. So this is a little bit of the heart that we have here today, and I'm, again, just real pleased to be among you guys. Barry, let's turn back to you. What drives people to volunteer? Are there some positive and negative reasons?
Yeah, and I tend to lean, and certainly my book work, what it uncovered and where I tend to focus is much more on the positive side, but I found that those who ever really think about this topic and its leadership maybe in general, that we spend a lot of time poking around and trying to figure out what it is that drives people. When the reality is it's so funny. I speak about motivation quite a bit and acknowledge that there's really only two types of motivation. There is the extrinsic motivation. It's the things that are applied from outside of us as individuals. And then there's intrinsic motivation. It's really about the stuff that's already stirring inside of our hearts that drives us to do whatever we choose to do. And certainly when we speak about volunteers, that intrinsic motivation, that's the stuff that's wholly at play. That's the stuff that really matters. And I suggest for all of us, and I would say that anybody who is on the call right now, anybody who is in this session or listening to this session, that you're a leader, even if you don't think of yourself as a leader. And the easiest way to answer that question about what motivates people is to just ask them, is to get really good, skilled at asking open-ended questions. And when we do that, we just get to be quiet and listen to the responses that we get and gain those insights. Instead of trying to figure out what motivates people, let's just ask them and let them tell us what drives them.
Got it. Well, how do you nurture that positive behavior?
Once you gain those insights, once you figure out what's stirring in the heart of somebody who chooses to volunteer on your board or get more actively involved on a project team or a task force within your community, whatever it might be, it's a matter of helping them to get aligned with then doing something that actually feeds that passion. They've let you know what's important to them. Well, let's help them get them lined up with doing something that actually brings meaning to them. And to me, that's the secret sauce in being able to continue to inspire a volunteer to serve. I think about the things that are important to me, and I've really been blessed in my own role within my own community and the service to the HOA for nearly 13 years now. It's this blend, this melange of things that all bring meaning and fulfillment to me, and they're the things that get me to respond to all those emails that I get, and there's not a flurry of them, or show up for those quarterly meetings and follow Robert's Rules of Order and all that good stuff, just because there's something that's good that comes back to me, and I inherently believe, and my research indicated, that is true for the vast majority of people who choose to volunteer.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a little bit what I read about when I read about how do I engage the next generation, how do we prepare for the future with millennials around us. I read so much about how they want to be purposeful, they want to have meaning, and that sounds like that's what you've touched on with what motivates volunteers. They want to do something that matters.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of generational differences study that's out there, and I challenge it only a little bit to suggest that I don't think it's just the millennial generation or the upcoming generations, but it's really all generations. We want to have some sense of purpose and to do something that brings us meaning and fulfillment, and I think that's true for all ages.
Okay. Well, can you give us any general suggestions for success with volunteer boards that both the board members that we have, the volunteers, on the webinar today and the association managers can use? What are some general suggestions?
Yeah, here's one that I use, and it's a simple 4-word sentence, but yet there's just so much that's wrapped up in it that brings power to those who you work with. And the phrase that I use is, what do you think? And I know often in our email exchanges and the conversations that we have both live and using technology within our own board members, it's a matter of asking what others think and getting lots of voices involved in the conversation. I write a bit in the book about a leader's job is not to motivate others, but to not demotivate them, and how to avoid being a passion killer. And I find that one of the greatest ways to do that is get lots of other people involved in the process. Leaders don't always lead from the front. Sometimes they lead from the side or even lead from behind. And it offers a slightly different perspective on how to keep those volunteers really in and engaged in what they do.
Can you take that a step farther and talk about how an association can not only work with, what do you think, engage current volunteers, but develop a pipeline of positive and constructive volunteers for the community?
Yeah, statistics, our census statistics indicate that about 25% of our population actively volunteers in some way. So let's first embrace that not everybody in your community is going to be the one to raise their hand and get actively involved. In fact, if you follow those numbers at all, maybe only 1 in 4 people might even be prone to getting involved or have a propensity for it. So first we embrace that, and what we really need to do is focus on engaging the engaged or the potentially engaged instead of trying to fight with the folks who are not going to be actively involved in any way regardless. And the way that I suggest that you do that is by trying to reframe your association and the board activity in as positive a way within the community so people see it as something good, and do a little bit less of the do this and don't do that, and a little bit more of trumpeting that message of this is the reason why we do what we do as a board, and we help people to recognize that whether you are an active person or not, we are all members of our association.
Very nice. Well, Bill, let's pop over to you. What has been your experience in board dynamics? Do Barry's comments resonate with you?
Oh, Barry's comments absolutely resonate with me. A board of directors really is a representative of the owners, and too many times 5 people in a board of directors gets together and they decide they know everything about everybody. But that's not really true. It's very tricky to get around it. I think to get involvement by the owners by gathering opinions through workshops, which we have are just gatherings where we don't have minutes or anything like that. We just talk, surveys or ratings. Sometimes we develop a task force, of owners to focus on a single issue before presenting it to all the owners. That gets more people involved in it, and it gets a better feeling for what the wishes of the owners are.
Yeah, I'm thinking also that when you have enough people involved, then none of the tasks become cumbersome or man-killing tasks, and it becomes something that you can share, and it's easy to feel like you've been able to participate when it hasn't been just a tremendous burden on you.
Absolutely right.
Okay. Well, how has the association fueled your passion, or were you largely self-motivated?
I think the best definition of motivation I found was that we do it because it makes us feel good.
Okay.
It's very simple. I'm self-motivated, but I'll tell you, I sure like it when owners pat me on the back and they say they appreciate my efforts.
Well,
so,
you said,
that's there too.
Yeah, you said earlier you wanted to stay busy, and this was a good project that you could put your energy and time into.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Is your association, you're 40-some units?
We're 45 units.
45 units. Are you professionally managed or self-managed?
For the first, we've been in an association for 13 years. For the first 10 years, we were self-managed. We had 5 people on the board that, were, sort of eager to, do the work of the association. Since 2013, we have a property manager. We're a senior community. It gets tougher to find persons who are interested in doing all the work required of self-managing. Our property manager is a great resource. Their staff handles much of the day-to-day operation and all the accounting. It's a good relationship.
Yeah, and I guess that's part of it too. Make sure that you have the assistance that you need, whether it's committees or professional manager, again, so you're not spending too much time in the drudgery of just the hard work of doing all the little things that it takes to run an association.
Yes.
Did you receive any particular training with respect to serving as a board member or a skill set?
My own training, a lot of it was learned by doing. Read a lot of books on association management. I attend mostly all the CAA conferences and expos, ask a lot of questions, read most of the CAI's best practices, and listen in on most of your webinars.
Which is probably another way we got connected.
That's probably it.
Barry, tell me a little bit about reflecting on Bill's comments, Bill's experiences, and how they've influenced his role and the dynamics of being a board member at his association. What are your observations?
Yeah, and something that comes to mind is I've really been blessed in the 13 years that our community has been in existence. We've been professionally managed from the outset, and we did have one management firm that was on board for roughly the first year. And much like I learned how to write a book while writing a book, I also learned how to work within an association while working within an association. And it was an ongoing process, but we knew something just didn't feel right in that relationship, and we were able to make a transition after the first year. And so for the last dozen years, we've been blessed with this beautiful relationship that we have with our management company, and they really understand their role in walking alongside us and being a partner and not being a group that tells us what to do, but makes recommendations at times, provides consultation when asked, and otherwise they really position themselves wonderfully as a support to the volunteer board role. And that's been my experience, and you add to that all of the, and we've actually had a rotation of service providers over the last number of years, but yet the organization as a whole has recognized that their role isn't really to engage us as board members, but to just not be a passion killer for us and to demotivate us. So been really blessed in that respect, and to me, I see that as being a huge part of our success equation on our board.
You said that twice now, to not be a passion killer. And so to come alongside, be a partner, support, facilitate the success of the board. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I've just been blessed to have found that that management company that really strikes that well. And I would challenge all associations to make sure that that's the person or the group who they have walking alongside them.
Cool. Well, Bill, at your association, let's transition a little bit to specifically the subject of reserves. Was that assigned to you, or did you gravitate to that topic?
Well, when we first started, I accepted that as part of the treasurer's responsibility. I viewed it then as worth doing and recognized the benefits to all our owners, even if they didn't recognize it.
And what surprised you most about taking on this Reserve Save project and diving into it, since it was new to you?
Yeah, the most thing that surprised me was how misunderstood reserve planning really is. The word reserves means different things to different people. The reserve planning and the financing of it is a little different than normal financing. And I think that's the first thing you got to do is break down those barriers and redefine it into something that's more appropriately to what it really is all about.
What would you say was one of the most misunderstood concepts that you worked on defining?
The biggest one was that the cost of deterioration is not an everyday cost, not an annual cost. Everybody thinks, why should I be paying for something that's going to be paid for or due that's going to cost people something in 10 years, 15 years from now. But the fact of the matter is deterioration happens every single year It just doesn't come. You pay for it in the future, but it happens today.
Got it. And like you say, when someone comes from the outside, they don't necessarily know that. How did you begin to build trust with the board members? You're one person, and you're new to this subject. You're new to the board. I imagine they're new to the board. How did they begin to trust you that, hey, Bill knows what he's talking about. We should pay attention?
Yeah. I think it probably goes along to the words of you have to sell it versus tell it. As a director, I'm 1 vote out of 5. I can present the case and encourage others, being the owners or the board, to buy into it. I think trust is built by listening to and really addressing the concerns voiced by our board. It's not an emotional issue. It's a factual issue. No sense getting angry at somebody because they disagree with you. I also try to share articles showing that reserves are not my personal passion, but are a real concern for other associations. It's just the right thing to do.
Fantastic. Barry, back to you. Sounds like Bill found a nice spot. Is that one of those attributes of success that you were talking about? People finding somewhere they can serve well?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly what I hear coming from Bill. And you hear, even as he discusses the additional work and the research that he's done and his desire to share it out with others, that there's some real passion that's there. And I know from just chatting briefly with Bill in preparation for this that the financial side of serving on the board is not really what he does professionally. And so, yeah, it's really about reminding ourselves that as we help other volunteers get aligned with doing something that is really going to be meaningful to them, it's not doing what I call a simple mapping process. It's not taking what they do professionally and automatically assuming that that's the way that they want to serve in their volunteer capacity too, but instead to help them find their sweet spot. So that what they're doing invigorates them and makes them feel excited and enthusiastic about wanting to continue to serve. And I definitely get that from hearing Bill talk about the work that he's done on behalf of his association.
Is that an element also of recruiting volunteers, just asking them what would they like to do and seeing if there can be something where they might fit?
It is, but it's not the whole of it. I mean, that's a good question to ask, but we all know that sometimes when you ask that wide open, that open-ended question, that we may or may not get something that is actually going to bring meaning back to the association too. So it's about finding a mutual fit so that what they're doing is actually purposeful for the association, but then also meaningful to them, the individual, too. So there's a guiding process that really needs to happen. And I talk a lot about you gain those insights, you figure out what somebody's really excited about or what they want to do, and then you help point them in that right direction so that they're able to connect those two things.
Yeah, asking questions and seeing what the responses are and working from that point, doing that engagement. Well, Bill, you're clearly a believer in adequate reserve planning. You've taken to that, and you've given me some of your notes. So I'm going to transition now to some of your points, some of the things that, with time, I'd like if you could share a few minutes with our audience today on reserve planning.
Okay. I mentioned it before. I think the first thing you have to do with reserve planning is just frame it right. I think it's very misunderstood. So I think basically you almost have to start from the fundamental definition of what a reserve plan for a condominium really is all about. The word reserves is powerful. Words are powerful. Words have different meanings. In our town and in our city, the word reserve means a contingency fund, a rainy day funds they call it, that basically cover unexpected costs in the future. The biggest misconception is that our reserve planning in condominiums have specific and definable projects that need to be accomplished. It's not a just-in-case funds. So, I think that's the first thing you got to get over. That's the first barrier.
Capture the strong ground.
That's right. Right. And it's specific and definable. The most significant misunderstanding is that the full cost of maintaining facilities are the annual operating costs, which we all know about. We do our budgets. But it's also the annual depreciation costs or deterioration costs. There's no future costs in that equation. I do remind our owners that we only have one source of income, and that's the owners. And they pay it now or they pay it later.
Yeah.
Either they pay it or their successors pay it. You pay less now and you'll pay more later. It's really that simple.
Yep. Well, tell me about working with the other board members on this project.
As far as working with the other board members, I think to convince them that the cost of maintaining the facility, our declaration is very specific, is that we have the responsibility of maintaining. Maintaining is the annual cost. It's also the cost of deterioration. And it really surprises me that an awful lot of boards don't consider this future cost of deterioration as being an important cost element. But it's a very critical one, and I don't think boards meet their fiduciary responsibility unless they outline that to the owners, let the owners know what their financial exposure is. I think reserve planning for many on the board is complicated. It needs it, and I think that's where they need someone who has to jump in and get it started. That's where your program, Quick Reserves, plays a significant part. It's a do-it-yourself web-based program that was developed by you to allow associations to do it yourself. The website is clearly developed, well documented, very powerful, and it's not hard to use. I think associations...
you just need someone on the board to grab it and go with it.
That's right.
Okay.
And I had one group that couldn't get off that point of view that the reserves, if you go after a reserve plan, it's going to cost owners money. Well, yeah, that's probably right, but to break the inertia in actually getting down to a draft plan. So we all know that reserve planning has three phases: the physical analysis, financial, and funding analysis. And what I told that group to do was forget about the funding analysis right now, because unless you do the first two, you really have no idea of how much your exposure is, what you need as far as funding. But after you do the first two phases, you have yourself a schedule or a map, a menu, so to speak, of all the projects, the costs, and when it comes due. And then you're in a position to say what the costs are going to be in the future. When you have the plan all set up and it looks good on paper, you can more or less tell the owners that you have a choice. The choice is we could fund it a little at a time and do it consistently, or we can go after special assessments. Next year is going to be 2,000. 3 years is going to be another 5,000 each, and when the roof comes due, it's going to be another 8,000 or 10,000. When they start seeing that and start seeing these numbers in front of it, they might come back down to the point of view of saying, hey, maybe a consistent, steady in funding of the reserve plan is an appropriate way to go.
Yeah, well, I've heard you say that you need to frame it right, you need to communicate it effectively to the other board members, have them understand that their responsibility, and then communicating it not only to the board but to the other owners, helping them understand that they are the only ones who will pay for this sooner or later. Is that what that boils down to?
That's what it boils down to. One time I used an analogy. One individual that was just bought himself a brand new car. I said, let's take it out of the realm of condominiums. Let's put it in a realm of something you're familiar with. I'm going to lease your car for 3 years. And the deal is that I will pay for your annual operating costs of gas, oil, taxes, and I'll even throw in car washes. After 3 years, I'll return the car to you. After I give it back, you pay for any tune-ups, brake replacements, tire changes, because those costs don't come up until the lease expires. That's what reserve planning is all about. Yeah. Capturing the total cost of maintenance, annual and annual deterioration.
And spreading them out over the people who are using it.
People who are using it, yep.
Yeah. How about other benefits? Is it a sales pitch, or what are the other elements to the reserve planning that you work with?
I mean, the biggest sales pitch in the reserve planning is that the cheapest way, or the least expensive, not cheap, the least expensive way to do it is a little at a time, consistently on a monthly basis as you go along. It breaks the spikes in what the reserve costs are and puts your funds in there. I think it demonstrates an organization has solid management. It's a great communications tool. To not only new buyers, but also to future owners, lenders, the FHA, if they ever want to go for condominium project approval, to convince them that you have good, solid management. A plan that's already documented assures continuity and consistency over different boards. We have people coming in and out of the board all the time. So basically, any document you can put down in front of them to say, hey, this is what we've looked at and this is where we're going with it. They have the option to change it, but then again, it was something to work with. And I think a good plan improves money management. If you had a good profile of the need for cash, you can invest optimally, whatever your investment media is. You can get the best rates. You can not leave money uninvested sitting in savings accounts or money market accounts. And the interest you generate here reduces the overall cost of the plan to the owners.
Yeah, having the bank make some of the reserve contributions instead of just the owners.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see. Well, I'm looking at the clock here, and boy, what a I'm just about without words. Barry and Bill, what a rich resource both of you are to our community association industry. I want to thank you both for joining us today. That concludes the formal part of our content, but we could go on and on and on. And because of that, I want to remind everyone of Barry's book that's available, again, for a special price through the end of the month, and a wonderful and a deep resource for working with volunteers, leading volunteers, being a volunteer, understanding where you fit in this, what makes you tick, how you can effectively serve for many years at a time. And then for Bill, his great article series that he put together for CAI Connecticut, A Labor of Love, and a rich resource. Boy, I believe that has great content that is of value to so many managers and so many board members across the country, just excerpting from some of your words. Both of those are just tremendous resources that I want to promote to the community association industry as a whole. Well, our guide, or our role here at Association Reserves is to guide associations forward, building financially sustainable communities, and that is done on the backs of volunteers. So as you heard from our guests today, we want to do a good job of working with and nurturing the head, heart, and hands of volunteers. We at Association Reserves are a professional resource, hopefully providing those volunteers with assistance, coming alongside them, and giving those volunteers and the managers who lead them, work alongside them, the information they need to make wise decisions. The resources you can get from Association Reserves are by going to our website, www.reservesday.com. You can go to our Learning Center. We've got a summary or an excerpt, a little bit of an outline of Barry's book there, and Bill's articles are there. A large number of other materials. You can also sign up for our email list and request a Reserves Day proposal. So some good stuff from our company too. And at this point in time, I want to transition to some brief Q&As. So I will turn the microphone over to Paige Daniels, who will serve as our MC. Paige?